I think we're live. All right. Welcome to Fearless Flight Live, our weekly live show. And this is actually the first inaugural crew edition. We branded that, right? Flight Attendant Diane and Captain Eric Larson here with me. Captain Ron is, well, he's assisting other fearful flyers. And while he's doing that, we thought we're going to create a bit of a new show segment for you, an addition. And we all broke out the white ceremonial Fearless Flight robes for the occasion. I think even Eric right there.
Yeah, I got my uniform thing on.
Yeah, I found mine.
And so what we're going to be doing is and I'm going to bring this up just in a second here. What are you guys seeing? The Fearless Flight Crew Edition?
Yes.
Yes.
All right. So tonight's topics, we're gonna one segment that we want to feature on our crew edition is Birds of a Feather feature story, and that's just posts that grabbed our attention and our hearts. And I know I have one, and Diane has one of those as well. We also want to bring back a classic, our weekly poll question. That's a little bit later on. And then we have two topics tonight. The first one, probably heard about, the Asiana Airlines open door incident. And then another one that happened in Southwest Airlines. So let's get started with our birds of a feather. I wanted to wrap up something that Captain Ron talked last week about, and that was Scott Madison. And Scott is an Aussie who married a girl from Germany who likes to go back to Germany from Australia, which I think it's almost like 20 years now. Don't quote me on that. It's a long time. So just recently, I think actually currently Scott is in Germany, and he asked to have other Birds of a Feather members track him, so track his flights. And it's just really, really amazing comments. And I just wanted to wrap up the story and say he did put a comment in there and said that he arrived safely in Frankfurt, and he was super happy to have the support from the Birds of a Feather group, knowing that, you know, somebody is looking out with him and for him. So I just wanted to share that because it really seems to make a big difference to people. And Diane, you had a story as well.
Yes, I'm doing the same thing, going through the comments and the wonderful posts from the Birds of a Feather group. And one really caught my eye. Well, they all do. They're all very important and meaningful. This one in particular caught my eye because it's something that I remember we had talked about quite a long time ago with regard to people's fears and exactly how their fears are sort of categorized or what their triggers are. And we sometimes sort of focus on the actual being on the plane, maybe the turbulence or that sort of thing. But we forget that there are a lot of individuals whose fear, it starts a lot sooner than that. They may be afraid or they're stymied in trying to book a ticket. And maybe they can get to that part, but they're afraid, their fear really rises when they get to the airport. And there are a lot of airports which are very big and they can be very intimidating. And so we understand that. And so one of the Birds of a Feather posters talked about that and the fear that this individual had with getting over getting to the airport, that sort of thing. And one of the other Fearful Flyer contributors did what they all do, and that is to support one another. And this individual talked about taking baby steps. And maybe it's a good thing to try. Don't just sort of dive in for that flight that you're going to take all of a sudden. Try going to the airport. Maybe a friend could take you, and you can park the car. You can take simple things like taking the elevator to the ticket level and just walk around the airport and become familiar with it. Where do you check your bag? Where are the TSA checkpoints? Those kinds of things, so that you're not flooding your senses all of a sudden when you are hoping to take that flight, that you can kind of do it little bit by little bit. And for some people, this is a godsend. This is really a wonderful way to kind of ease yourself in, particularly if you have a family member or friend who's fine with it, and they can really kind of, maybe literally or emotionally, hold your hand while you just become acclimated to this kind of foreign world. And if you have a smaller airport, if you can go to LAX or Burbank, maybe you can pick a little bit littler airport to kind of go adventure. But this is the sort of thing that the Birds of a Feather group, they do all the time for one another. As they were following Scott, and so he knew that there was someone there, people there, sort of emotionally taking care of him. And the same thing. So it's just
that's why it's the third leg of our Fearless Flight method, right? Community, connection, engagement. And I just want to say to what you shared, Diane, in psychology, that so one is exposure therapy, literally exposing yourself to the stressor or to that which creates anxiety, right? We call that trigger here at Fearless Flight. And the other part of it is overtraining. So putting ourselves in a situation over and over allows ourselves to become familiar with those sensations and with those experiences that astronauts do it all the time, Navy SEALs do it all the time, Olympian athletes do it all the time. For them, it's part of their job, it's part of their normal.
Right.
And yet we can really take advantage of it. Everyone can, but as a fearful flyer, especially exposing ourselves to the airport and to the hustle and bustle and all that stuff that's going on.
It becomes a little less scary the more you do it. So yeah.
Absolutely. All right. So let me kind of go into our poll question here. So tonight's poll question is, and we're going to talk about the incident next. So if you cannot answer it yet because you don't know about the Asiana flight incident, then that's okay. Hold off with answering until Captain Eric has walked us through that. But does the news about the Asiana flight incident increase or decrease your anxiety when you think ahead towards your next flight? And simply yes, no, and then why or why not? I guess is a great way. And I want to say hi to Kay Glover from Georgia, Marcia, Schafer, and Jim Duke. So I'd love to hear your answers to the poll question. And okay, I'm just gonna read that out to both of you, Eric and Dan. Kay wrote she took a class at Emory called Fearless Flyers, and when it came time to take the flight at the end of the course, she couldn't get on the plane. Well, first of all, I'm very sorry to hear that. And secondly, I want to commend your courage for coming here, and maybe even that talk that follows from Captain Eric might trigger you. So that's a great place to practice exposure therapy. And so I'm gonna just leave that poll question and move on to the Asiana flight incident. So Captain Eric, I'm gonna stop the share for a little bit because I gotta say, until that incident, I actually felt really safe in the knowing that once the plane is in flight, the doors would be inoperable for the general public. And then probably like everyone else by now, I was made aware of this Asiana Airlines flight, which was a commercial flight on a, Airbus, right?
Yes.
And just before landing, somebody was able to open the door. And so I thought to myself, geez, I felt safe believing in something that's not even true. And what I want to say though is after listening to you, Eric, and after, really thinking this through, I'd feel just as safe 99.999% of the time on any flight that, I'm going to be taking about that. So with that, I'm going to just pull up our first image, and then I'll just let you take it away, Eric.
Okay, and I don't want to go too long, but I want to answer questions. If there was a whole bunch of chat where all of our viewers said, what Asiana flight incident, then I don't even want to talk about it. But I know they know what happened, so I'm going to talk about it. This made me almost physically ill because I struggle to tell you guys correct information all the time, and I'm not afraid to tell you I don't know. But as it turns out, I've been lying to you about this for about 3 years, that you cannot open these in flight. And that's true 99.9% of the time. And this guy got exceptionally, quote unquote, lucky in picking a very thin moment in time when he could do this. And I'm going to explain how in a minute. The top slide is a picture with a door open and people's hair getting messed up. I like this picture of this gentleman down here with his seatbelt on, and he's thinking, okay, I'm glad I'm not seated next to that guy, but his hair isn't even messed up and stuff's not leaving his hands and flying out the window. He's just going, oh, this is a little more strange than usual. So over here is a picture of the door that's open, now twisted in the frame. And below it is a picture of where the emergency exit slide was before he opened the door. There was a flush panel on the side of the airplane to cover it up for smooth airflow. And when the slide gets ready to deploy, that panel gets bumped off. So that got ripped off in the airstream. And as soon as the slide deployed and went out, that got ripped off in the airstream too. That's somewhere behind where the airplane was. So that's the picture. And now I'm going to tell you how this happened. This isn't too nerdy, but Dieter, can you put the profile slide up with the pressurization controller?
Yes. Just give me a second. I got myself there we go. This one here.
That one there. Okay.
All right.
So this is out of an Airbus pilot manual. And I got to tell you, I've lost some vision the last couple of days trying to find a technical chart, because the second question out of Diane's mouth and Dieter's mouth was, well, how high could he do it? And because those absolute numbers are meaningless to us operationally and vary with airport elevation, we don't have a chart in there showing at what altitudes the airplane will be at what differential pressure. We just know what the limits are, what it operates at, that sort of thing. So cutting that out to altitude was nothing I could find, and I tried really hard, and I'm not done yet. I think I can find a tech manual of that, but I don't have it now. But what this is a picture of is the big horizontal line going across is the ground, and it says time on the end, by the end of the hash mark arrow. So then it shows the top profile is what the airplane does. It goes along the ground, it takes off, it climbs up to cruise, and then it starts back downhill again and lands. And the bottom profile that is the same shape proportionally to it underneath it, that says cabin, says this is the altitude the cabin is flying at while you're in there. So the airplane takes off, there's a, fairly steep climb. That's fair to say. And then it's a cruise, and the cabin comes up to a differential pressure, in this case of 8.06 psi, which holds it to no more than 8,000 feet at cruise. You're higher than sea level elevation, but you're not anywhere near the airplane cruising at 35 or 37,000 feet or what have you. So the differential pressure inside holds the cabin down, and it also pushes the plug doors, the emergency exits, the doors, and the windows into the holes with great force. Now, when the airplane starts down, the pressurization controller goes, oh, they're going to land pretty soon. He's starting down, so I will start slowly depressurizing the cabin. I'll come downhill too. And so it unwinds the differential pressure in the cabin until the point where there's that arrow, see where it says MLG compressed? That's main landing gear compressed. That's what that stands for. That means the airplane's on the ground. And in fact, the pressurization controller still has a little positive pressure on the airplane to keep the door seals from rattling and making noise, and to keep a bump from people's ears. And then as the airplane taxis, it slowly bleeds that pressure off to come up to the landing elevation, so the doors don't pop and so on and so forth when they open it. Now, what this guy did was he got very, very lucky. I will still say with you really can't do this during takeoff and climb, because the airplane climbs through the lower altitude so fast, the pressure builds up on the doors and ports very quickly, and there wouldn't be a time envelope to do that. But if you're maneuvering for an approach and you're maneuvering 1,000 feet to 2,000 feet above the airport elevation in a traffic pattern and coming down slowly, and he did this is key at 600-700 feet, depending on the reports. If the airplane was maneuvering slowly enough, descending slowly enough there, and the pressurization controller is unwinding the differential pressure to very close to what the pressure was on the ground. And it was reported there where he did it, the differential pressure was only 1/10 of a PSI. The door area was, I looked at it, was 2,160 square inches. So with a yank of 216 pounds, he was able to dislodge the door handle. Now, a couple things happened right there. When he did it, the door isn't artificially intelligent. It just knows two things. It's either armed or it's not armed when it's going to open. And it's armed for emergency exit because the airplane is taxied and it's flown. And when it does that, when you yank the handle, the door goes, oh, there's going to be an evacuation here and I'm armed. So it does a couple of things. There's a seal on the top and a seal on the bottom that flip up to neutralize any pressure still between the cabin and the outside. The reason behind that being the door's about to be open. So there was very little differential pressure to start with. And then when those seals open up, that makes it go to zero. The other help he had is there's a nitrogen canister, depending on which model airplane you have, but on the 321 it has it, a nitrogen canister in there to assist the flight attendants in an emergency evacuation with opening the door. So he starts to get the door cracked and that nitrogen canister goes off because the door is armed, and it goes, hey, people are going to jump out. Wham! So he gets a big extra push from that nitrogen canister. So he got very little differential pressure. He got the seals to neutralize it. He got the nitrogen canister to push it open. And really in that very short envelope of time was he able to do that, which was kind of incredible. And I was going to have Dieter put up a slide of the crow that I'll be eating for dinner, since I've been lying to you about that for 3 years. But I remember when I saw the guy go, no, unbelievable.
So
go ahead.
No, there are a lot of questions in chat. So I'm gonna just answer them briefly as I can, and if there are other answers, Diane.
I just want to throw in one thing, just to reiterate what Eric said, with the notion of something being armed or not armed.
Mm-hmm.
When you're on the plane as a passenger, you may hear the flight attendants make announcements to one another. about arming the doors. The doors are armed. The aft doors are armed and cross-checked.
Yeah,
The
I've heard
forward
that
doors
before.
are armed and cross-checked. That is something the flight attendants are very focused on at that time. For just what Eric said, is in an emergency, as soon as you pop the door open when it's armed, that not only does the door open, but the escape slide automatically inflates and people can exit the aircraft in the emergency. So if you're the passenger and you're listening at the beginning or at the very end when you land, the doors are disarmed so that the escape slides will not automatically deploy when the doors are open. So I just wanted to throw that in case the passengers are hearing that on the aircraft, what exactly that means.
Thank you.
And I think that with that is, I'm gonna come back to what I started with. I still feel 99.9% safe that the door is actually inoperable. So let me get through some of those questions, and Shally, I'm gonna
30 more seconds, and then let me.
Okay, sure.
30 more seconds. So that was the technical explanation. Now, as you recall, I mean, this is equivalent of flipping a quarter and go, look, and landed on the edge. How fun is that? Now that it's out there in the TikTok verse, is that a word? The TikTok verse? Now that it's out there in the TikTok verse, everybody has seen this. After 9/11, after the successful attack of the hijackers in 9/11, we took many security precautions to keep the cockpit from ever being breached again, which it never has been. Not only has it been breached again, the pilots have not had to defend it, because in all cases, when somebody got up and attempted to do that, the passengers piled on them like a classic, I shouldn't slam the Midwest, but I'm going to say a classic Midwest bar fight, have dogpiled on who's ever attempted to do that. And oftentimes, either a mentally challenged person or somebody confused as to which door was the bathroom, they've stopped them from doing it. And I'm going to go with, now that this is out here in the TikTok verse, it will be a very unpopular passenger action to have somebody get up and attempt to open a door or a window hatch. And I'm going with most of the rest of the airplane will not be approving of that activity and will pull them off of it in short order. I just wanted to throw that out there on top of the low odds of them getting away with it.
All right, so there's a question that I'm going to just redirect to you, Diane, because it just popped up and it seems, well, where was the flight attendants? That was the question. That was not...
And that's a reasonable question. The flight attendants, I fly in a different aircraft, but for the most part, on these aircraft, the flight attendants are either all the way forward or they're all the way aft. The jump seats for the flight attendants forward are right by the main cabin door. Depends on the aircraft and the configuration. And the same thing with the aft flight attendants back in the galley. There are jump seats back there. So when we say, when we give briefings, for example, for the exit row, are you willing and able to assist in the eventuality or possibility of an exit, emergency exit? We're telling those individuals and asking them, because we're not going to be there. We're at either ends of the airplane. So that's where the flight attendants were. They were buckled in and harnessed in their jump seats at the very opposite ends of the airplane. So
okay, all right, cool. Thanks for that, because good question actually. So couple of other things. One person asked, I think it was Tomic, said, was he rushing to get out? The answer is yes. I believe he wanted out, and he wanted out right then and there.
right then.
Which to me already indicates a somewhat confused mental state, because if you actually thought this through at that height, probably not going to work out in your favor. But aside from that, couple other questions were, did the masks come down? And I'm going to say no, but I'm going to let you explain why, and also maybe reiterate what you shared earlier, why the gentleman's hair was just dandy and not going back like Ferris Bueller. So
yeah, number one, it's good to have hair, and his hair looked good, and it was not being blown all over the place. And as I mentioned, the differential pressure of the cabin between the outside air was next to nothing, 1/10 of a PSI, and this occurred between 600 or 700 feet. So this wasn't anywhere near an altitude, a cabin altitude that would cause the mast to automatically drop.
Okay, and so also an interesting and legit question is, what about how cold was it when they opened? I mean, if it was only a couple 100 feet, how much is the temperature difference between? Would it be significant at all? Not at all.
It was in Korea, and I think it's fairly temperate
Mhm.
there now. I mean, reasonably nice, and I can't stop myself from saying the wind chill factor would have been awful, but I don't think it was cold outside. 70s, 80s, something like that.
Probably. I went skydiving a couple of years ago when we went out at a lot higher than 700 feet. And it was it was Phoenix in the sun in the early summer, late spring, and it was comfortable. I mean, so I doubt, like Garrett said, it was very cold.
Well, any skydives I've ever done, by the time I was at 700 feet, the chute was open.
Boy. Yeah, so
I think it's
yeah,
about
exactly. So it's not-
1300 feet.
Right.
What I remember of 1500 feet.
yeah, we went out about 1300 feet. So
No, when your chute has to open, not where you jump out of, but
right. Oh
when
yeah,
the actual parachute opens.
I know. Oh, we went free fall for about a minute. So
Yeah, because I did it up in Sedona, and we 16,000 feet actually. So, okay, so then there was one. Jim said, that's where you keep your seatbelt on, even if the sign is on.
yay!
There's always room for that one.
Thank you very much for bringing. That's we count on you for getting that.
And I want to come around and let you know about a couple poll answers. Marcia said, yeah, she was shocked about it, and it might not happen in a million years, but for fearful flyers, that's attention getting. And to be quite honest, I think it's attention getting for anyone.
Attention getting for me.
Yeah, for me too, absolutely.
Yeah.
And I hope that, Leslie, that everything that we kind of shared here on the show tonight, you don't have to Google too much more, and you know that you are safe. And I want to end this with, a broader question that basically is asking, will there be any, changes or any recommendations, from the FAA, maybe even for North America? It didn't happen here, but the one thing about the aviation industry is they're really very good at learning from their mistakes and then kind of distributing that knowledge throughout, or when I say mistakes, incidents, things that come up. And so do you think, both of you, that there is even a need for something to be done about it? Or
Go ahead, Diane, if you had anything.
I honestly don't. I don't have a thought on that, to tell you the truth.
I can't imagine. Dieter goes, and he asked me, but he was serious. Do you think they'll make any more rules? And I said, well, what? It's already a rule to have your seatbelt fastened and your bottom in a seat. And I can't see the flight attendants making a PA without dying of laughter with it. And also don't open the doors. Let us open the doors. I don't think they're going to be making that kind of a PA. But I don't know what. I can't imagine what else would possibly come up. I don't know what.
And I mean, if it was too technical for some of you, that explanation of why 99.9% of the flight, the pressure is actually what keeps the door inoperable for, I'm gonna say, a mere human.
Yeah.
And so that's what that chart was about, that Captain Eric went over. So it is still true that for most of your flight, and usually you said that usually you kind of cross, even in the approach, at such a timing that's just not.
Yeah.
And my planes, my regional jets, for our emergency exit doors, we don't have a nitrogen assist canister. So it's all arm strength. And so there's no way. I can't even imagine.
So then
Or
let's
you're on the
end,
ground, that thing open.
let's end our first Fearless Flight Live Crew Edition with something. I call it a Southwest Airlines incident, and I guess in some ways you could call it that. However, we're gonna, while some are dying to get out, some are actually dying to get into a plane. And in this case, who is that, Eric, that is trying to get into a
That's
737, and why?
That's either the first officer or the captain, and I don't know which, and I applaud him. What they said happened was, and we have pretty good locks on the cockpit doors now, post 9/11, that a passenger, they were a through flight, so they had passengers still on board, had come out of the forward lav and bumped the cockpit door shut, which then electrically locked. And it's a pretty good lock. And there's other methods of getting in there, but I can't really talk about them, or the FAA will hang me and feel like they've accomplished something for summer travel. But this is one of them, and it's interesting for a couple of reasons. Number one, it shows the pilot's side windows on the 737 and on the Airbus models are emergency exits for us to get out. And you can open them from outside. That's intended in case the airplane has had an accident or incident or whatever, and the pilots are incapacitated, so that rescuers can open the window from outside and drag them out. So that's what he did on the first officer side. He released the window latch from the outside and slid the window back. Now, here's where he's my hero, because I'll tell you right now, that ledge is real sharp. And it's not easy to crawl in there. Even if you're pretty athletic, he has nothing to catch himself in. You can see he's got one hand on the glare shield and probably putting the other hand down in the seat, figuring how he's going to get the rest of his body in there without destroying his knees and his ankles and other body parts that we can't talk about without messing up our G rating. But I would guarantee you that he probably thought this was a better idea before he did it than when he actually did do it. But nevertheless, he got in there, he got the cockpit door open, and he saved the Southwest operation, allowed it to push on time, not take a delay, so they could get the door open, that kind of thing. So he was a fine fellow for doing that, and I very much applaud him.
He was the hero of the day.
Yes.
Definitely. And Jim said, and it's a 737 with a yoke to climb over. So
yeah,
no, that's dedication. And like you said, he probably thought it was a better idea before he did it, but he did it anyways, and everybody got to where they needed to go on time. So thank you, Diane, and thank you, Eric, for being on the show, the crew edition of Fearless Flight Live. And I think we pretty much caught all the questions. And if there are any more, then we'll collect them and address them in a couple of weeks. Okay?
Very
all
good.
right.
All right.
Any last words?
None for me.
Not for me. Okay.
Hey,
Well, in that
done
case,
enough
I
for me.
hope you enjoy a great rest of your week, and we'll see you back next week. All right.